today is not going to be too long of a conversation, but we're going to cover things like the dualistic genders of genders, um, that sort of concept, parasitism, how dark feminine manifests in its two ways, um, in, well, the grander scheme of society, societal dynamics, behavioral dynamics, um, the role of weakened or, let's say, feminized men, um, in this parasitic exchange, how to avoid um, becoming victimized by this sort of parasitic exchange. Um, Altogether, very very interesting topics. I touched on these things a little bit on my post a while back. Maybe it was half a year ago or something. My post went a little bit viral with it. But as always, the the power of the shadow ban kicks in and sends us back into pseudo irrelevance, as it is programmed to do by the you know who's of the universe. But here we are, and here you get to listen to hopefully some interesting takes on the universe and the world at large, with me. Now, as you all know, I like to root my, not theory, not even theory, just observation. I don't like the word theory because it implies that whatever is being spoken about is some sort of abstract idea that's drifting somewhere in the clouds, and it's like fantasy La La Land. But it's observation. It's high level observation when it comes to human behavior and psychology, but at a grander scale, and how these features or aspects of the collective human psyche, how they manifest in the world at large. Now, why this is a very interesting topic to talk about is that largely, um, nowadays, this has become, especially in the West, in the Western part of the world, this has become the dominant energetic form of energetic exchange. And I think Western society itself, which is far less spiritually inclined than historically it has been, doesn't understand it. It's its blind spot, so to speak, right? So let's talk about Instagram. Let's go back to my post that went a little bit viral. What is Instagram? Okay, so if you go on Instagram and you scroll, doom scroll, I believe it's called doom scrolling, or if you doom scroll a little bit, inevitably you will, find yourself on the part of Instagram where a bunch of what I would say are average looking women, um, they are engaging in this incredibly synthetic and h- how do I even say this? Like, scripted behavior, what I call scripted behavior, and this scripted behavior involves marketing, right? Self marketing. So self marketing, not their business, not their talent, not their singing or dancing, but well, there are singing and dancing involved sometimes, but they're basically self marketing themselves. They're the product of their evolutionary progression throughout the linear years of time, which is their body, right? Um, and how they do this, right? Let's say I post a cutesy video of me dancing, right? And keep in mind the the sentiment of innocence and non-harm. This has to be present. So while they do this parasitic exchange, these sentiments have to be present at all times. This is like a non-negotiable part of it, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. So they'll go out, sing, or they'll dance, or whatever. They'll do a stupid little dance, and they're going to showcase their sexual gifts, right? Hey, look at my reproductive organs, right? Hey, look at my body. And what happens next, right? Um, Now, the female mind, the dark feminine, loves to encapsulate itself in its most shallow form. So, to translate that into like basic sentence, the female mind loves to convince itself that it is not analytical and not smart. So, it loves to play stupid. It loves to play dumb, not only for the men at large that it's engaging with, but also to itself. The female mind is incredibly capable of fragmenting its objectivity and lying to itself, right? And it needs this, and I'll show you why it needs this. This is a sort of like survival mechanism, evolutionary survival mechanism. So now, let's say we're singing and dancing, we're marketing our body for the whole world to see. And this is where the very interesting thing starts. And this is what I posted about all that all those months ago. And I said, well, if you really study Instagram on a social behavior level, what it is it is a bunch of prostitutes who are using the gain of attention from weak and desperate men as a trampoline to get themselves to show up on the feed of desirable men, right? So this phenomena to me as a behavioral psychologist was incredibly interesting because when I look at it, I'm like, the signs are all there and it's happening under everyone's noses. Yet no one looks at it that way. So they look at it as like this, oh, it's just Instagram, whatever, whatever. But the process, the parasitic exchange that's happening there is fully true. So again, I'm going to repeat this, right? Let's say I'm a woman in my 20s or whatever. I'm fairly attractive, right? I can use all kinds of filters to make myself even look more attractive. I'm going to go on Instagram and I'm going to post 25 stories of me, just dancing, some of the videos I'm wearing clothes, other videos I'm not, right? What is the wavelength of this content? Who does this attract? So this attracts two kinds of males. One who's very young and impressionable, very young, impressionable, who does not have access to things like porn. Number two, someone who's relatively older and very desperate and unsuccessful in the sexual market, right? So I have these two types of males, let's say two types of quote unquote simps, that my content, in terms of like what wavelength it is at, is attracting. So all these men see around them are desirable women who they very much desire, but they are unable to attain, right? And the strangest phenomena here is this long distance cucking that these men engage in because they very well understand the social mechanism between what they're doing when they like and share and subscribe and engage with this content, right? So the moment you're a desperate weakened man, you're in your weakened state and you engage with this sort of content, right, that this woman is completely unavailable to you, but you still like her post, every man deep down knows what they're doing by doing this. Deep down, they know that they're engaging in self deprecative behavior because you liking her content is allowing her to skyrocket herself, to give herself to other men more. So you're not only sort of like embarrassing yourself on that level, but you're also reducing your chances of ever attaining that woman because you're elevating her on a platform above you. So she's going to shadow you below her new platform. And this new platform serves for her to be served up to men of what she deems and society deems of superior quality, right? So the question here is the dark feminine, yes, the trigger point of it is through female behavior, which is rooted in a deep-seated idea of unsafety. And we'll get to that in a minute. But the primary moving mechanism is the the corrupted feminine side of the male gender, right? So the moving mechanism for the dark feminine to attain its idea of material safety is the weak man that is being harvested for its attention, energy, resources, right? As a means to achieve the unachievable. And why I call it the unachievable. So when you see a woman behaving this way, almost always it is linked to a deep-seated fear of material loss. So women who behave this way, who allow their dark feminine to sort of like take over, have an incredible sense of fight or flight at any point of life. They feel deeply unsafe. So they feel deeply unsafe because of the lack of physical features or the lack of physicality to defend themselves against the material world. Yes, but they also feel unsafe in the sense of they feel unsafe in their capacities because um, they've dumbed themselves down to such a degree in their own mind to become a desirable women for weakened men that they cannot break this illusion of innocence and inability, right? So if a woman wants to attract a competent man, let's say in her dark feminine state, highly competent men do not enjoy highly competent women, right? So she has to dumb herself down into someone who is incredibly incompetent and unable to provide or do anything outside of her sexual services, right? And that is the how to put this, that is the essence of prostitution. So the essence of prostitution has nothing to do with the physical exchange, like sexual intercourse, but the essence of prostitution is the destruction of the competent self within the female behavioral pattern, right? Your behavioral patterns become um, all about your inability to do things, your inability to relate, your inability to relate to other women. By the way, so women who are damaged in this sense, one of the first signs you would have is their attitude in regards to other women. So women who sort of like dislike and hate other women, they see them as competition. This is your first sign that she feels deeply unsafe because you can't even feel safe in the presence of another woman, right? Same thing for men, right? If a man doesn't feel sort of like content with themselves and safe in the presence of other men, that they are deeply corrupted, right? But going back to the social dynamic part of it and why I call it not why I call it, but why it is objectively, right? A parasitic lifestyle is because these women who harvest the attention and energy and so on and so forth of the weak men that support them. Let's call them simps, okay? Um, so what are simps doing? Again, let's mention that simps are delivering her to the male she desires, but is out of her league in her own understanding of leagues. Okay, why are simps doing this? So why is a large portion of men actively engaging in self-deprecating behavior that makes them less likely to have sex or sexual intercourse or receive sexual favors from the women they desire? And this is the problem, modern problem of the Western man. Deep down, deep down, and this is because of years of programming and reprogramming and sort of like the cultural shadow side that has been sort of like the veil that has been put over their faces. And the male ego is a degenerate thing, by the way. It you can't convince a weak man that they're a weak man. You can't convince them because they see themselves as powerful in all their states. So it's impossible. Like I could talk to a man who engages in this sort of behavior, like someone who simps over a woman and like likes all of their posts and shares all their posts and you know functions as a sort of like an emotional pillow for her. I could tell them, man. I think deep down in your dark mind, in your dark psyche, this is your way of self-deprecation. This is your way of cucking yourself, before the world. And they would call me a coward and they would call me all these names, but here is objective proof through your behavioral patterns that you're engaging in self-destructive behavior and you don't even realize it, but actually you do realize it because there's a portion of you, there's a damaged, traumatized portion of you, and men also get traumatized, believe me, that is that feels like they deserve this, that feels like they deserve to be trampled by other men. So it's the strangest thing ever, in the sense it's a funny, ironic thing when you look at it from a side, but it's also very sad because these are men who are engaging in the most latent pseudo homosexual self fetishization through liking and sort of like synthetically engaging with female content, but actually through this content, they're cucking themselves in the most homosexual manner, in the sense of allowing other men to step over them even further. So let's say a woman comes to me and, hey, like, um, I'm going to give you nothing. I'm long distance, and here are pictures of, like, semi nude pictures of me. Um, would you elevate me to higher status as a woman? And the man says, of course I will elevate you to higher status. I'm convinced that if I do so alongside my 80,000 other, weak degenerate men, I'm increasing my chances of receiving the sexual favor. But let me tell you something. Deep down, every man knows that it's not going to happen. Every man knows it's not going to happen. Because what men are taught from day one is that you're not special unless you make something special of yourself, right? So all men know this is not going to happen. It's just what they tell themselves. It's how they convince themselves. Like, why am I engaging in this self cuckery, right? Why am I engaging actively in homosexual behavior? And these are most men who see themselves as, like, quote unquote alpha or red pilled or whatever. If you look at them and they dress like it and they try to act like it, but in truth, they're divinely cucking themselves through their inability to see their own trauma, right? So these are how weak men are harvested. And I think if you saw a weak man, you wouldn't know one, like, on the street, right? Because they're usually the ones who make a big show out of being, like, very masculine. And if you open up their Instagram and their phone, it's always like big butts, right? Twerking women and whatever. But in truth, a man who goes around and, all they're doing is, like, elevating these women who are, like, twerking their asses on Instagram, right? If they're elevating them to get to men, um, to fuck these men, right? They're distancing these women from themselves by doing so, right? So these are the biggest cucks, and largely, in my opinion, and I don't mean this as an offensive thing. I just find it funny because when I call this homosexual behavior, because these men are convinced that they're highly masculine. They're highly masculine in their expression, right? But they're not. Um, and now, why this parasitism occurs, the female engaging in this sort of behavior, they are convinced that if they accrue more material wealth, attention, so on and so forth, their feeling of unsafety will go away. Okay, so they're this deep unsettling, thing that they have. They're convinced that this will go away if I just accrue more material wealth, it'll go away. And then eventually they'll get to that man who they want to get to, and they're going to get it on with that man who they want to get to, because they're only access to high status men if they themselves are high status. But a prostitute cannot become high status. Think again. They can, if they harvest the energy and attention of these weakened men, of these men in the weakened state. So they get to the male through attention. Let's say she has 160,000 followers. This means that she's highly in demand. This is what sort of like the lesser man with the higher status thinks. Oh, if like 160,000 guys like her, I'm gonna go and have sexual intercourse with her, just just because he is coming into his power like this, because by doing so he's cucking us 160,000 suitors. Okay, this is how men think. I guarantee you, this is how men think. This is men who are at the peak of their competitive nature. This is how they think. So he's like, look at these 160,000 losers paying her for her feet pics and paying her for all of this content. They'll never get a piece of this. But here I am. She's throwing herself at me. So I'm just going to go take this meat. 160,000 men cock. And this brings him into power, right? Now, this is male parasitism, which we're not going to talk about today, but we're going to talk about that later. And that does a disgusting thing to you as a man, by the way, if you engage in that. But um, back to our current topic, if you understand this dynamic, you understand that good, virtuous women today, what are they rewarded with? Just answer this question. You're a good, virtuous woman. You don't engage in social media prostitution. You don't embrace your dark feminine, which the Western world desires you to embrace, right? You're 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 not harvesting weak men. You're not abusing. You're not exploiting everyone. What do you get as a reward outside of being a good person? Okay, I understand that being a good person in and of itself is a reward and should be, and is very much is true, right? Of being a virtuous person, you do it for yourself, but on a societal level, because societal external stimula, right? Societal external stimuli is very important to teach the young and impressionable, let's say both women and men, how to behave, what the accepted norms and the moral and the ethical boundaries of behavior is. So, what's their reward? Nothing, right? So you're telling me, oh, women are not virtuous anymore. What are you doing to incentivize that as a society? I'll tell you what, the Western society, including USA and Western Europe, is doing nothing to incentivize that. So they're worse off. They're worse off. They have far less resources, far less material resources. They have to work a lot more, like incredibly more, right? So the average sort of like, even let's say a feminist, a female who's like a decent person and she's like just working a job and she's trying to empower herself through a positive understanding of female empowerment, she has to work all day, right? And she's a female, right? She doesn't have the the competitive drive to constantly fucking push herself, let's say like a male would on its own. And then she comes back home to 160,000 men gooning over another average woman's content on Instagram, and they're paying him $25 a second for it. But she sees here's this other chick. She's making $150,000 a week, right? But just taking pictures of herself, and this is becoming the accepted norm. Why the fuck would I be an ethical, virtuous woman, right? And the only reward that she used to have, the only is the partnership and camaraderie of a truly high value male. So the only thing this woman has against incredible material riches that have never been available, like so readily available for her in history, the history of the human race, is a good man, right? Is a high value man who does not entertain the likes of the prostitutes that are looking for, well, secretly, they're also looking for him, right? Well, now what's the problem? Because men like this are being actively replaced with men who feed the platform, right? Who provide sustenance and material wealth, who transfer their wealth to prostitutes. So I'm telling you now, if you're a good, virtuous, truly virtuous, beautiful woman, um, and there's just no truly high value men to come by, what do you do? What, you become a lesbian? Like, what do you do? What is your way in the world? You become a nun? So this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a society or a societal collapse in the West because the men who are presented to you as masculine, or the men who see themselves as masculine, they're actually the biggest cucks. They're the biggest homosexuals you will ever encounter because all they do is reward non-virtuous behavior. Yet the problem, the narrative of the problem, is always described as what happened to all the good women. Well, I'll tell you what, you're the masculine force in your society. It is your input that is materially manifested in the everyday living, not female input. So when you're saying like Europeans, I hear a lot of Europeans, we have to like strengthen ourselves. All of these refugees are coming in and fucking our women and taking our women. Who allows this? You're the masculine container. You are the setter of boundaries within your society. You are the one who sets the limitations. And you said this is not a limitation. And then you have deeply traumatized women who feel incredibly unsafe to be part of a genome that is so homoerotic that the only way they see their survival is to literally give themselves to men of higher aggressive quality. And if you don't think this is societal collapse, if you don't think this is incredibly tragically sad to see a once warring nation turn into raging homosexuals who are so latent in their homosexual behavioral patterns that they have to use the hidden bureaucracy of social media to enact their own cuck fetishes with other men. If you don't see this as a tragic downfall of a once masculine society who worshipped masculine beauty, I don't know what you're thinking about. I don't even know if you're thinking. I don't even know if you're watching or seeing or observing what's going on in the world. So, how to avoid non participation? That's how you avoid it. Well, first you have to completely reprogram yourself and gain a renewed understanding of what masculine behavior truly entails. It's not having big muscles, okay? And this is coming from someone who's trained my whole life. It's not having big muscles. It's not walking over others at work. It's not having a lot of money. It's not having a job. It is the ability to provide containment and a feeling of reliability and safety for the feminine charge, who by default is looking for this safety. So I love when men come out and they use like gay as a slur towards other men, but they're actually the gayest, right? Like at least men who are naturally gay, right? They're playing their role in society, right? They're playing their role in society. They're far braver and less cowardly, right? Because they're coming out and say, "Hey guys, I'm gay." But the men who are engaging in latent homosexual behavior, they're so deeply traumatized that they cannot even admit to themselves that they have been programmed into fetishizing self cuckery. This makes it incredibly difficult for me to relate to and emphasize with and respect most men I talk to. Because most men I talk to nowadays, especially from the West, and I don't say this out of hate or spite, especially from the West, they engage in at least one of these behaviors. At least one of these behaviors. There's a lot the Western male needs to relearn from men who are still in their truly masculine states. And just because your country has a lot of resources, and just because your country has material generational wealth, and just because you haven't truly had to use your masculine qualities to safeguard the material fucking well being of your family, country, and nation, and so on and so forth, just because it doesn't make you a superior male specimen. It actually quite objectively makes you an inferior male specimen. That's why cowards nowadays are coming out and they're talking shit to men on the front lines in fucking Ukraine. I don't care what side of political, whatever spectrum you're on. I don't care if you think this one is right or that one is right. When a pussy, a certified pussy, comes out and talks shit about people who are in the deep fucking trenches of fucking war, piss, sweat, blood, and all you're worried about is buying your second fucking car and where to fucking park it, how can you take yourself seriously as a man? You have lost every standard of knighthood. You understand what I'm saying? You've lost every standard of knighthood. You don't even respect yourself enough to honor the sacrifice of a warrior. Weak men are afraid of other men. A weak man, a man who is disempowered, would rather see all of their competitors die and perish. I'm serious. They don't look for brotherhood. They don't look for family. They don't look for teamwork. They would rather if all of the other men died, let's say Elon Musk and quote unquote his mission. Oh, my mission. What is his mission? He wants to spread his seed, which he thinks is superior to everyone else. And then secretly he wants to subvert the masculinity of other men because this is what weak men do. And this is what the dark feminine also wants to do, because the more weak men that are in the world, the more of a platform they have to enable themselves to accrue material wealth. But you know what the sadness of all this is? As soon as she gets everything she thought she needed for safety, she still feels deeply unsafe. She still feels incredibly unsafe. And then you know what happens? The fragmentation of the emotional body. And how that's manifest into the world is, I mentioned that women, who are stuck in their dark feminine states are very good at lying to themselves. So then what happens is these women become usually victimized and victims of physical and mental abuse, because I'll tell you why. She realizes that she can only feel safe through delusion. She can only feel safe if she deludes herself, if someone else deludes herself into a feeling of safety, and sort of like the understanding of, well, it's bad, but it's not going to get worse than this at least. So she likes predictability. So if she has, like, let's say, a boyfriend who beats her up every other day, right? She's signed that contract with her, like, on an emotional level, that okay, it's this bad, but it's not going to get any worse because this violent behavior is predictable. And she finds safety in the delusion. So it's not about her actually being materially safe or not, because she can't see the difference between those two things because she's in a constant fight or flight response. Get it? So whoever the exploitative male who shows up in her life and convinces her that she is safety through reliable patterns, that pattern could be positive and negative or extremely violent, she will become attached to. This is why a lot of these sort of like prostitutes and online prostitutes and women, by the way, think there's no price to this. They genuinely believe there's no price to this, but the price is your own self, right? That is why they end up really badly most of the times, right? They don't end up well. A lot of these sort of like prostitute types, because they're fragmenting their psyche. They're not understanding that there's a major trauma present, and that's sort of like firstly diminishing their true selves, but then also enabling these behavioral patterns that are self-destructive. So the woman's way to self-destruction is by exploiting and abusing other men through using their dark feminine, which is like, their sexual desirability, right? Their charm, they'll play innocent here and there, blah blah blah. That's her way of betraying herself and self-deprecation, right? Because she is going to give herself to men who, firstly, will exploit her heavily and then not desire her, then make herself unable to be desired by a truly virtuous, like a truly moral, masculine male. And how men do it is they pretend like they're highly masculine, but they're actually engaging in this, pseudo homosexual cuckery that I call simping over other women over, the internet, liking their posts, sharing their memes, just giving them a platform, providing, because if there are no simps, none of these village girls from Romania or whatever the fuck, right? None of these village prostitutes have any sort of platform. The only reason they're visible to truly high status men is because simps chose to get her there. These simps choose to get her there. I hear a lot of men say this, and I think this is degenerate. And I'm sorry if I offend someone, because I've heard a lot of people who I follow and a lot of men who follow me, and I respect you, but you say this and they say, like, if I were a woman, I would definitely use my sexuality to get ahead in life. Ahead of who? Who the fuck are you getting ahead of? It's the same as me saying, if we want to live in a degenerate society, it's the same as me saying, let's say I'm a woman, and I would say, yeah, if I were a male, I would totally use my physicality to get ahead in life. What does that sound like? Like, just tell me, okay, what does that comparison sound like to you? To me, it sounds like, I'm a male, therefore I'm physically stronger. I'm going to go and I'm going to wrest control of your house. I'm going to steal your house. I'm going to rape all your women. That's it. I win. And men, even men, think this is okay for them to say. Like, if I were a female and I used my sexuality to get ahead in life, I would definitely would. Well, okay, I'm a female and I'm saying, if I were a man, I would use my physicality to get ahead in life. What the fuck does that mean? Like, a lot of people just say this shit. They say this stupid shit without actually thinking about, like, what it means and what it entails, right? Now, we decided at some point that we live in a civil society, right? We decided this on a collective level. This means my ancestors just 3 generations ago would ride on horseback into another tribe's village, right? They would chop all the fucking men down, right? They would kill all the male children. Okay, so their males wouldn't be raised in their village. They would take all of their resources and all of their women. They would go back to their village, right? And then they would be celebrated. They would have access to more women. There would be less men to compete. You understand? Like, just a few generations ago, this was happening. So some men who said, you know what, guys, let's stop killing each other, let's stop raping each other's women for a living, and let's decide that we live in a civil society. What does a civil society entail? It entails that men do not use their physicality, right? Their natural gifts to get ahead, quote unquote, in life. Because what does that mean? Me getting ahead means you getting your fucking arms broken off. Me getting ahead means you getting put into the fucking dirt, right? Let's say I'm a male who's militarily trained, right? So let's say I am militarily trained. You know what that means? I don't care. You could be a heavyweight, you can be like the smallest man or whatever. I can probably kill you. So the average male who is not trained like martial arts or knife fighting or weapon usage, I can kill you. I can literally dominate you because I'm militarily trained. So you're telling me you want to live in a world where militarily trained men have the capacity to, it's like if we create a new social media website and call it Only Guns, instead of like Only Fans, like Only Guns. And you go on there and it's a bunch of dudes with like weapons and shit, and you pay them money and you buy them better guns so they can go out and dominate other men better, right? Hey dude, like, take this AK-47, bro, go out and fuck those dudes up, man. You ever seen the movie The Purge? Right? That's where you're going with that line of thinking. So it's the same saying, like, oh, what is the weapon of female dominance? Is their sexuality? Is their desirability? So a lot of these retarded men, again, I'm sorry, I love you guys, I respect you, but you're retarded when you say this, okay? A lot of these retarded men, they're gonna come out and they're gonna be like, well, if I was a female, I would use my sexuality to get ahead. Well, okay, let's live in full out anarchy then, right? I'm going to use my military training to destroy you and dismantle your civil society, and you come out and you use your sexuality to dismantle my society, and let's see how far we go before mutual destruction is achieved. And this is what's happening in our world right now, because on a collective level, this is a lesson people in general, the human race, is yet to learn, that civil coexistence is only possible if we follow a strict code of ethics and morals that are sort of flexible, where forgiveness is a civil duty and a virtue. But the moment you tell me you want to Wolf of Wall Street through life, right? You're not particularly smart. You're just morally unhinged. So you think you're dominating the modern lifestyle. You think you're dominating the modern living and modern lifestyle because you're morally unhinged, and you're mistaking that for your masculine expression. I can take you to a tribe of cannibals who are also morally unhinged, more morally unhinged than you. Let's see how far you fucking last there, bitch. So again, if we want to understand why degenerate behavior exists, we have to address trauma on a collective scale, both in male and female. Men like to lie to themselves that they live in an immoral world, but they don't. They live in a civil society, especially Western. Oh, the world is like so. You haven't seen shit. I was literally pissed out of my mother's womb. Like, I was pissed out of my mom's womb into blood and mud. What the fuck are you talking? What the fuck do you know about cold hard living? You don't know shit, but you're pretending that you're in this world of like lions and wolves, and you're allowing yourself your dark masculine state, which is a survivalist mindset, right? The biggest dog gets the bitch mindset, but you're hardly the biggest dog. You're not even like average. It's just that everyone else has agreed to live a moral civil life. Same thing for women, right? If we're going to engage in degenerate culture where virtuous good women are not rewarded with anything, right? And virtuous good men nowadays are not rewarded with anything either, by the way, because most of these women are traumatized and damaged. They actually are attracted, they're magnetized and attracted to men who will exploit and abuse them, because these are the men who are high status nowadays. The good, virtuous working man is no longer celebrated. He's a fucking nobody. People need to realize that personal input, it ultimately matters in your life and in the collecting living of everyone else. So you don't get to step out of the boundary and go, haha, I'm just going to sell ass pics on the internet and get ahead. Yeah, you're materially getting ahead, but you're spiritually destroying yourself. You're morally and ethically fucking destroying yourself. You're self deprecating. You're embracing the degenerate programming of the world. You're not advancing anywhere, and you're not going to achieve whatever you want to achieve anyway. I saw this snippet from a Mr. Beast interview with that podcaster do this really, but he asked him like, Mr. Beast, like, you have so much money, are you happy? And he says something like, "Oh, I'm more unhappy than happy." Of course, you're unhappy, you degenerate, because you're a sensationalist. You vicariously feed off the intense emotions of others. You don't have a moral purpose. You don't have like an ethical purpose. You don't have a spiritual purpose. And if you think you go out there and like, oh, we cured 150 people out of their blindness, great. God bless that act, but why the fuck did you do it? You did reviews and content. It's the same as if I'm a prostitute on Instagram, feeding homeless people for the next 15 days. And I go out and I'm feeding homeless people and wearing a fucking bikini. Why the fuck am I doing it? Am I doing it to feed homeless people? Or am I doing to attract more eyes and me, 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 me? Me, 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 me. Look at me. Non participation, my friends. Non participation in the degeneracy you see every day is casting your vote on an energetic level and on a material level that I'm not going to engage in this degenerate behavior. And we can, and, some demagogue is going to come in and they're going to be like, oh, look, it's very subjective. What might be degenerate to you might not be blah, 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 blah. So if you're a man, if you have logical analytical thinking, you understand that there is such a thing, there's such a notion or sentiment that exists, and the sentiment is called objective, analytical, pragmatic thought and results based thinking. So if the result of me punching you in the face is then me getting punched in the face, is this a bad deal or not? Is this a degenerate deal? Yes. So now what's happening in the world is you see I'm punching you in the face, right? But I'm not actually materially physically punching you in the face. I created this whole elaborate mental gymnastics, bureaucratic fucking funnel that is blurring the lines between what I'm actually doing and the results it's achieving. I'm actually am punching you in the face, but the bureaucracy and the mental gymnastics involved are so deep that if you don't actually like expertly study the effects of me doing a certain behavior, you don't see how I'm punching you and well, basically myself in the face, right? And our society, and this is by design, I think, um, has created this effect where people have stopped realizing how much their individual and personal input matters because their personal input has been reduced to pressing a fucking heart emoji on Instagram. But every time you press the heart emoji on Instagram or a like or dislike on YouTube, you know, if it's an online prostitute, you're punching yourself in the face, man. You're reducing your value. It's so funny. If I was a black magician, right? If like like a lot of like those um let's say in the deepest realms of conspiratory thought, right? If I was a black magician, well versed in the Kabbalic and Talmudic arts, and like like Hungarian, like Nordic magic, um, and like Slavic, like dark chanting and whatever, I'd be sitting in my fucking basement just laughing my ass off because like here I got these millions of people, right? And they're clicking a heart emoji, and by doing so on a daily basis, they're reducing their value as human beings, as males and females. Here I have these females who are deeply unsafe. I made them put all of these pictures of themselves on the internet, like lewd and nude, and I can go out there and like dress like very humbly and gain the attraction of all the highest value men because they're starved of truly high value women, which also I'm not because I'm a dark magician in my basement. But just disregard that. You have to live as if all of your choices and behaviors are of ultimate importance. You understand? Like whose post do you like, how you greet your neighbor, so on and so forth, especially if you're engaging with the internet because it's so easy. Like um, in the past, if I came to your home and I said, hello, sir, this is, would you sign off on this? Here's Monica, your neighbor. And Monica is hosting a twerking party at her apartment. There's going to be a lot of booze and a lot of degenerate behavior for low quality wenches. Please sign here if you approve of this, party to take place, your behavior or whatever, and sign here and here and here, here and here and here, here, and this your confirmation, blah 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 blah. at least that's a process where you can, like, you have a few seconds to think about, what am I actually signing off on here? Like, like, what like, what is going on the internet? You're signing that same contract, but with a single click. You click it, I agree, right? Every time you click the fucking heart button, you're like, well, degenerative behavior, yay, awesome. Let me platform these deeply traumatized, o- low quality women to doing their exploitative and abusive shit. Awesome, right? So someone will come to me and say, "Oh, it's not that serious." Actually, it is that serious, but you're just a shallow thinker. You cannot understand the macrocosm and the macro chain of how a slew of individual inputs shapes the cultural environment and the cultural attitude towards the singular human mind, the single human person, right? Once you understand that an individual behavior is insignificant, but 160 million individual behaviors are culture defining occurrences, right? You start to think very differently about the world. So the world is the way it is because it can't be any other way. You understand? Like, it's it can't be any other way because the feedback of our own lessons that we have imparted upon ourselves can only happen through violent, abusive means, through COVID, through war, through violence, through famine, through injustice, through all these terrible things. I swear to you guys, it's just us on a collective level just punching ourselves in the face. It's just us. Like, because these are lessons that we have yet to impart on our conscious selves. So, who loves this, right? Who loves to see the dark feminines are sort of like on the forefront of all cultures nowadays, mostly Western cultures, right? The weakening of men, so on and so forth. Where, well, the enemies of culture as a whole, right? So you have sanity and insanity, anarchy and nihilism against sort of like a sense of civility and forgiveness and tolerance, true tolerance, not the fake tolerance. Who celebrates this? If I wanted to conquer a nation, and this is like KGB 101, right? And a lot of people, like, they know what the KGB is and they know what they stand for, especially in the West again, but they don't understand what the KGB is incredibly good at. And what the KGB is incredibly good at, it is long-term psychological subversion of their enemies, right? What does this mean? Well, if I wanted to weaken a nation, I would create a false sentiment in their collective mind of female empowerment, which is based on male disempowerment. So I would disempower the males, I would empower the females, right? So then when I swoop in, remember what I said about my ancestors 3 generations ago? They would swoop into villages, right? Well, the men are weak and you can physically overpower them, right? They don't even concern themselves with masculinity and war and safety and reliability. And the women see themselves as independent and strong. They see their men as weak. Their men are indirectly cucking themselves to, other men of high status or foreign men of high status, right? So now all I have to do, I have to go in and whatever remainder of high status men that is, I have to wipe out the elite. What did the communists do in Russia? What did the Ruskies do in Russia? What did they do in the North Caucasus? What did they do in the South Caucasus? Partially successfully, very successfully in North Caucasus. Caucasus. They took all of the great thinkers, they took all of the great men, they took all of the strong leaders, and they executed them. Boom, point blank. Only the weak genes remain. Only the weak men remain. So all I have to do now is like swoop in, take care of the strong men, take the ladies, take the women, who are okay with their men dying in hundreds and bunches. They don't care because they see them as weak cucks. And they see their safety, their ultimate safety, because they're so traumatized. They see it in foreign men who are far more masculine, who have a higher degree of aggression, who are much more masculine, use less divisive and feminine tactics. They're less you understand, like they're direct, right? A male who is manipulative to a woman, right, to that degree, like let's say a male who like gaslight a woman or whatever, truly gaslight, not the fake shit that women like to blame on men, like truly gaslight, right? Who are manipulative, so on and so forth, like they're far more dangerous to the average woman than a man who literally slaps her over the face. I swear to God, this is not me talking. This is like observation of female behavior and what they're attracted to. They're literally will be. I'm not saying, I'm not excusing any of these behaviors, but they will literally be attracted less to a male who gaslights or whatever, and emotionally manipulates her into feeling incredibly unsafe, to someone who actually is capable of making her feel safe and steps her around, once every 3 days. It's just the truth, right? Um, there's a lot to think about these topics, right? And I wish there was a moral lesson to it that I could like, oh, like, let's conclude this talk with this incredible moral lesson. But it's just a sad, sort of like pseudo tragic observation of the state of the world today. I know we didn't talk about the occult or esoteric stuff. Like, today this is like almost like a purely like a behavioral psychological deep dive into how these concepts sort of like pop up in the material world. And I feel like a lot of people, especially in the spiritual space, that they will use like words like, oh, the Jungian shadow and the dark feminine like paradigm or whatever, but they don't have two fucking ideas what that means on a truly on a psychological level, right? Because these are psychological concepts. Keep in mind, these are not abstract spiritual concepts. Like these are not like chakras that you can't see. You understand? Like these are behavioral psychology concepts that actually exist, and they're tangible things, and they're theories, and they're proven theories that sort of like manifest themselves on a human collective level. And we just called it that. We just call these are actual things that exist in the collective psychology, the collective psyche. We just chose the terminology to call them that, right? We just, you know, they have to have some sort of name, right? Um, anyway, this has dragged on for way too long than I wanted it to, but a little rant, a little info, a little of something to think about, observe. Please consider what you're participating in, right? If you want to build a beautiful world, if you want to build the sort of, how do I even say this? The eventual light destiny of Earth, and it's wholly possible. And it's wholly possible at any moment. Treat your life and your action as of ultimate importance. I'm here telling you right now, whatever you do on the daily basis, however you do it, is of ultimate importance to this world and to yourself. Is of ultimate importance. You have never lived in a time where your actions and your input have mattered so much in the grander scheme of things, even if the whole world today is telling you the opposite. The whole world today is teaching you and telling you and programming you to think the opposite way because it's afraid of your individual input. But your individual input, which has been reduced again to just clicking an emoji or clicking a button and whatever, remember, the devil is in the details, and the devil loves a contract. And the devil loves a contract that doesn't seem and sound like a contract, but you will always have to sign off on it. Sometimes it's by clicking a heart emoji, sometimes it's by, you know, saying a word to the wrong person. Like, get it? Like, evil likes, like, by evil, I mean chaos and insanity, right? Chaos likes to simplify. Chaos loves to simplify the means of your self deprecation, and it likes to present it as something it is not. It won't make it difficult for you to support its claim, so to speak, right? Remember, both light and dark are here to serve your advancement. But the true enemy of creation is uncreation. The enemy of sanity is insanity. The enemy of objective reality and objective truth, pragmatism, practicality, is impracticality, chaos, nihilism. That you're so fragmented from your psyche, you're so fragmented from your truth self that you can no longer determine that which is real or not. If you become a weak man or a weak woman to the highest degree possible, you will become harvested by the demons of insanity, by the demons of chaos. I don't mean this in a scary way, okay? But I'm saying that departure from objective reality is the first way to diminish your soul and your value as an individual being. So, first, observe and study and learn from the reality, then accept reality for what it is. And maybe, just maybe, you will have gained the mental fortitude and the physical faculties required to change this rotten world for the better. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Um yeah, buy my shit if you haven't already. Um Share and repost. I'd appreciate that. Much love to everyone, and we'll do another one. We'll do another one in a few days, okay? And we'll talk more about occult concepts, and less about behavioral science. All right. Much love to you all. Bye bye.